Here we go. Happy holidays. Happy 4th of July. To those to whom this holiday is relevant, I hope you're celebrating in some meaningful way. And I hope you're having a good time and a safe time doing it. I think it's appropriate and timely for me to put a video up today when my country is celebrating its independence. I've had some folks check in with me recently, wondering what my thoughts are on everything that's been going on around our strange little community here lately, and I feel like I have a few things I need to say about it. So this isn't another ascension message or retirement video or anything like that. The truth is that Lornography is dead, and to paraphrase Nietzsche, we killed it. But, I needed to die. It needed to die, and it needed to die so that it could be kindling for the flame of teacapism, which is most certainly the future of our strange little cult. After my ascension, I realized that my place is not one of departure, but of assimilation and integration. I am a teacapist. But that's not what I'm here to talk about today. It's Independence Day. I'm thinking about what it means to be independent, and it's contingent on what one is trying to achieve independence from. We each have a lot of personal pilgrimages toward different kinds of independence that we have to complete in our lives. And one of them, to borrow from the Christian scriptures, is to put childish things behind us. And in that spirit, I want to address briefly some of the people who are on the periphery of our scene, who have recently demonstrated how far they have yet to go to put childishness behind them, and why the rest of us need to put their childishness behind us. Children crave attention, in those formative years when a child is first discovering that he is a discrete moral agent or that she is a discrete moral agent. We're acting in a universe filled with other moral agents, each discrete and independent from one another. We're all bouncing around out here trying to find our ways. And in those years, a child is also discovering that his actions or her actions elicit responses and reactions from those other people. And that attention is a crucial and vital part of that process for a whole bunch of different reasons. But the challenge for us in that time is that we don't always understand the difference between good attention and bad attention. So it's incumbent upon our parents, if they're good parents, to teach us the difference. It's that detail, it's that little tweak of understanding that makes the difference between good people, productive members of society who are good neighbors, people who contribute positivity in some way to the collective. It's the difference between those people and bad people. Bad children act out because they don't know the difference between good attention and bad attention. It's all attention to them. It's acknowledgement of their existence and their presence and their potential ability to influence the world around them, and that's what they crave, is that acknowledgement and affirmation. But this dynamic, it doesn't always go away in childhood. Often it kind of lays dormant inside a person, or it's never corrected, and the result is sometimes that we have adults who do dumb things, or in some cases objectively bad things, because they don't care what kind of attention they get. They never learn the difference between good and bad attention. So as long as they're getting something, they feel fulfilled. We see it a lot. A lot of the time it's harmless, it's benign. It could be the loudmouth who drinks too much and then acts a fool because he thinks he's a superstar when he's just at a karaoke bar. That kind of stuff happens all the time. Somebody who's excessively extroverted just has to be the center of attention all the time, But usually even those people who have those kinds of issues with attention as a function of their low self-worth or their need to be affirmed, they can hold that unhealthy need in tension with what they know their responsibility is as members of society. And that's one of the things that makes the internet such an intriguing and often challenging environment, because the internet affords people an opportunity to act anonymously, to act in total anonymity, So it gives us the freedom to act on many of the impulses that we would never indulge in the real world, because we know that there would be immediate consequences for doing so. You know, it's like mouthing off to the guy that's bigger than you, or telling your boss what you really think of her, something like that. And we can think of lots of examples of this kind of behavior on the internet. You know, the disgusting pervert who would rape a child in the real world, but for the consequences. A guy like that can find a 13-year-old girlfriend and groom her online, and gradually introduce sexual ideas and concepts and behavior to her. And the whole time he's programming her mind, which is malleable, and laying the foundation to have his way with her by controlling the conditions of their encounter. And he's brainwashing her not to spoil those plans, and subtly training her to believe that this kind of behavior is somehow acceptable and even desirable. There's the double-talking con man. He might not be quite slick enough to run his scams against people who are slicker, smarter, or otherwise better than he is out in the real world, but he can find real marks in a virtual world where there's a marketplace, and sadly, suckers in that marketplace. And he can do everything from sell investment advice to online dating to computer game coaching. Then there's like the internet tough guy. And we've all seen these clowns operate. You know, they're the ones that post on discussion forums where they can hide behind the obfuscation of false identities. And they use that confusion to make baseless attacks against productive members of society, people with real important jobs and families and children, because they think they can get away with it with no real-world repercussions. And the truth is that often they can. But the rub is that this life is wonderfully complex. It's a perpetual motion machine, and it sustains itself and regenerates itself. And despite all of our best efforts to destroy it and to destroy ourselves, it just keeps itself going. And in my view, that kind of dynamic can only exist if somewhere and somehow in the fullness of time, some brand of cosmic justice is ultimately dealt and dispensed to those people who choose to be contagiously evil. Have no illusions. That justice is going to come for all of us. You know, it's why the wise people among us know that we should teach our children rightly about being good and productive people. See, the wise know something about the nature of reality. They know that even if a man's crimes are never punished as we perceive punishment, ultimately the scales are always balanced. We may not ever have the privilege of seeing those who choose to do evil be paid back for their wrongdoing, but if nothing else, they have to carry the unbearable burden of being who they are. There are some of these kinds of people in our midst right now who have been doing awful things. And when I sit here and ruminate on some of the terrible things they've done and said in recent days, I have to remind myself that even if our notions of justice never catch up to them, they have the saddest fate imaginable, because they have to live with being ugly, nasty people. They have to exist being the kinds of people who will only ever find refuge and acceptance in the arms of others of equal ugliness and nastiness. But what about us? Those of us who have to take the high road or choose to, for our benefit and for the betterment of the world we help build and endeavor to sustain, how do we tell ourselves from the human rubbish that we have to strive to elude? Because you have to know a thing before you can know whether you should embrace or avoid it, all right? Well, I referenced the Christian scriptures once before, so let me return to it by saying that we shall know them by their fruits. That, my friends, is the message for today. We shall know them by their fruits. The Christian Bible states that God is not the author of confusion. Actually, I don't know if the Bible says that or not. Somebody said it. Somebody said it about the Christian God. And I'm not advocating the Christian God here, but to apply that principle to our dilemma, I think we can tell who the good ones are, the good people, and who the bad people are by looking at their fruits, by looking at the fruits of each. behind whom is left a trail of confusion and chaos, a wake of destruction, and behind whom are left good works and positive energy. That's how you tell the difference. You know, to put it into relevant, salient terms, if there were one among us who, say, held valuable commodities in his trust, like money, and there was confusion swirling around those holdings, complicated, confusing explanations about PayPal accounts held in the names of family members, and opaque explanations given about where the money is and why it can't be returned and why it hasn't been passed on to its intended recipient or passed back to its original contributors. And let's say that that same person was also the overseer of like an information hub, like a website where matters of the community were supposed to be discussed, but that information hub was continually shrouded in the same sort of confusion and double talk, with people being silenced and their accounts being banned and people being hacked and all sorts of suspicious activity that we couldn't make sense out of. And then, let's say that same person also had an internet video channel where every day one confusing miasma after another of disinformation and lies and half-truths was uploaded, and it almost seemed to be deliberately engineered to confuse people and misdirect people and obfuscate the plain truth of whatever was really going on. And then let's say that that same person were discovered to have multiple presences under multiple identities in multiple communities for years across the internet, playing the same games and leaving the same wake of chaos and confusion behind him. Now, if such a person existed, would you trust him or her? That's how you know. You know them by their fruits. And goodness, good people are not the author of confusion. I want to give you one more example to help you recognize evil when you see it. This community was born out of this bizarre fascination we have with watching people who would do harm to a child through sexual perversion receive their comeuppance and kind of get what's coming to them. But what would it look like to harm a child through sexual perversion? Does it have to be physical? We can all think about what it means for something like that to happen physically. I mean, the very thought of it is really heartrending, isn't it? To think about what an adult is capable of doing to a child physically. But we have to understand that the greatest damage is done in the realm of the mind. So I want to ask you, what is the difference between a grown man forcing his body on the fragile frame of a little child physically, and that same grown man tricking a child into seeing a photograph of an unclothed adult by sending that photograph to the child's Facebook page? The way I see it, the only difference is that one takes place in the physical realm and one in the psychological. But the psychological damage is done in both cases. The damage to the child is the same. And so much more damaging if that photograph is of one of the child's parents. It is psychological rape. I want you to hear that again. You trick a child into viewing a photograph of his unclothed parent, that is psychological rape. So you shall know them by their fruits. So ask yourself a question. Is there any context in which it is ever okay to rape a child physically or psychologically? If you, as an adult, have differences with another adult, does that justify you raping that adult's child, either physically or psychologically? I will answer for you. There is not. It is a vile, ugly, wicked thing, and anyone who would or has done it is a sexual terrorist against the child he has aggressed. So you shall know them by their fruits. We have some of these villains operating among us, dear friends, and that is why I make this call to action. We may never be able to take the measures that we wish we could against those thugs, but ultimately it doesn't matter. Whether you call it God or goddess, karma or whirlwind, the pantheon or the invisible hand, the scales of justice which govern the universe will, in the fullness of time, mete reward and punishment out to all of us. These people are madness, and you don't reason with madness. You turn away from it. You take the high road. You take the path of virtue. You move onward and upward. You allow the madness to turn in on itself and ultimately to destroy itself by letting its carriers fester in their own lunacy and in the misery of simply being who they are. And ultimately, you kill the madness by starving it of the attention upon which it's feeding for its very survival. As for the people, you consign them to the worst fate that they can know, which is an eternity of utter darkness, trapped within themselves, forever deprived of your eyes, your words, your thoughts. I keep coming back to the Christian religion, so I'll come back to it once more and paraphrase the great thinker C.S. Lewis, who wrote once that the doors to hell are locked from the inside. So to apply that idea to our discussion here today, ultimately, we each choose our own fate. And ultimately, the fates of those who choose to be terrible people is that they are doomed to a life where they have to suffer just by virtue of being who they are. Who would want to be someone whose noteworthy accomplishment in life is causing a ruckus on some obscure little fucking internet forum in some ill-lit corner of the internet? Or to be a guy who has to make his living by running a dozen different suspicious websites and day trading his way to a pittance? Not me. Not anyone who has a modicum of self-worth, self-respect. You have to live every day as someone like that? Well, that's basically being given a life sentence in a spiritual prison, like a spiritual San Quentin. And I can think of no sadder fate. You know, we used to say all the time around here, we would say, at least you're not Lorne Armstrong. So, think about that. Hold your head high, good people, because no matter how hard your life gets, you can always take solace in the realization that you are not that you are not Brother J. Well, I'm not here to name names. You fill in the blanks. My call to action for all of you is to cleanse yourselves utterly and forever, and to cleanse this community of the negativity and the ugliness that has for too long plagued it. And let's supplant it with positive energy, with mutual support for each other, and a return to the thing that we all can agree brings so much joy and fulfillment, which is laughing at all these dumbass predators out here in the Prediverse. And what's more, let's turn our eyes upon the light, because the glory is that there's plenty of it out here. Okay? Look at what Shaman is doing. The based shaman. He's taken his calling in this community to actually do some good. He's got this TCAP-based shaman version. And, man, I mean, it's great stuff. He's already laying waste to some of these creeps out here trying to hurt children. You got to check out his channel if you haven't lately, because he needs and he deserves to be recognized and supported for what he's doing over there. As for the future of the community, I mean, it's TCAPism, baby. You go to Templar Tix's Temple of TCAP forum and check it out. Come interact with the best people this community has to offer. It's a killer resource for TCAP and TCAP-related material, and it's growing all the time. The most important thing, though, is just to be good people. Try not to have differences with one another, and if you do, handle those differences in responsible ways. Be patient, communicate. Don't do it through personal attacks and libel and malicious lies and hearsay. You know, there's a saying, if you lie with dogs, you wake up with fleas. And to tweak that saying a little bit, If you lie with pigs, the only thing that's going to happen is you're going to get filthy. And I think we all know who the pigs and the dogs of this community have been, and it's time to leave them to their fleas and their filth. So, those are my thoughts for the day. Take care of each other, look out for one another. Stop feeding the sickness by giving it the attention and the views and the interaction that it wants. This is U.S. Independence Day, so on the occasion of a nation's independence, I declare it to be our Independence Day. And I encourage all of us to proclaim our independence from these viruses, cloaked in human flesh, that have long enough brought nothing but chaos, confusion, and discord to our ranks. Let's be about our business, onward and upward. That's all I got to say, friends. Take care and be well. Pope Pendleton, out.